Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome SBI listeners, readers, and viewers. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI. And we're a management consulting firm specializing in sales and marketing, dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the weekly SBI podcast, and it has a simple purpose, and that is to help you make your number by getting your peers to share with you how they make theirs. Today's guest is Andrew Wright, and he is the Vice President of Design at Cypress Semiconductor, a semiconductor company with 3,500 employees who does approximately $1.5 billion in annual sales. Andrew is responsible for bringing new business from concept to profitability and owns the global P&L for all design activity. So Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, right now, my audience, mostly sales and marketing leaders, is asking, why the heck did Greg have a product design guy on this show? So let me explain a little bit. Today's show is about product launch. Many of you are carrying a number this year, which includes a revenue assumption for a product yet to be released. Screw up the launch and miss the number. Nail the launch and blow the number away. This is why Andrew, an expert on product launch, is on the show today. He's going to help us think through this. As always, we're going to use SBI's revenue growth methodology to guide our conversation. And today, we're going to focus specifically on pages 98 through 106. If you want to follow along at home, get a copy at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. Okay, Andrew, I would like to begin our interview with some questions regarding launch planning. So question number one, how do you determine your launch goals, things like revenue expectations for a new product?
Got it, Greg. Well, so let me give you a little bit of context on the semiconductor industry, because I think it might be different from many of the things other people out here are working on. Our ASPs range from a nickel all the way up to $10 plus, and maybe in the A&D industries it might be in the thousands of dollars. So there's a very big range. The vast majority of our revenue complexity is not associated with predicting ASP, because we understand that pretty well versus the products we're thinking about making. The vast majority of it is forecasting volume. And so really understanding how we're going to be successful in revenue really means understanding our business, the opportunities that exist on a socket-by-socket base across our customer base, and where we're going to put our product. And then based on those sockets, forecasting end market demand, so what it is our customers will be able to sell into the end market based on their share of their TAM.
Okay, very good. That is good context, and it's good lead into my second question, which is regarding deciding on the initial set of target customers. So for you, if setting launch goals is about forecasting volume, I would imagine deciding on your initial set of target customers is a pretty important task. So how do you all do that?
So obviously we understand the customers with our sales force that we have a good relationship with. The ones where we have built the relationships that are successful from a new product's perspective, and where we think there's a high probability of design in and design win, where we think that we'll convert product interest to money, and we bias our decisions to launch based on the opinions of that set of customers. Beyond that, obviously, just like anybody else in a competitive industry, we forecast taking some fraction of share in the industries where we're being successful, and understanding what that means for our forecast revenue streams.
Okay. So for the audience that might not be familiar with the semiconductor industry, could you just briefly describe the concept of design in, design win?
No problem. In our industry, there's a long latency through the new product development cycle. If I go from initial concept all the way through adoption by our industry, we go through an initial concept interaction with our customers. At some point, fairly early on in the development, we get to the point of design win. Our customer has committed to actually using a product, and we're in the process of developing a product. At some point soon after that, we have a design win. We communicate with our customer at a contract level that we expect to have something used by our customers. Beyond that, there's what we call a footprint select. So we've actually achieved a milestone in their development cycle that allows them to convert that to something real. So we see them adopting our product in their end product, and we see technical progress to that end. Somewhere soon after that, there's revenue. That revenue is usually very small, associated with evaluation. And then soon after that, there's revenue that is substantial, and we call that the NDW, where we converted from a new design win to an actual revenue stream.
Okay, fantastic. That was a really good explanation. And maybe just to bring it to life a little bit more, are there any consumer products that this audience might be familiar with that your chipset goes into?
A very large number. I don't want to list off a whole slew of end products and alienate an audience, but think from a product perspective, handsets, set-top boxes, cars,
okay,
dashboards, infotainment, very broad.
Okay, great. So by the time I go to a store and buy a handset, you probably were winning a design maybe 2 or 3 years before that even hits my hand. Is that correct?
You can assume that we were winning a design probably 18 months to 2 years before you have the opportunity to buy that in a store.
Okay, got it. All right, good. That's some great context for the rest of the conversation, which takes me to my third question for this segment, which is regarding organizational readiness, specifically the sales team, but also a little bit more broadly than that. So how do you prepare the organization and make sure that they're ready for this launch?
Got it. So we have a multi-phase launch process like anybody with complex new product development. It's a high investment business. And we have multiple phases associated with new product development, each of which has almost exponential growth in our expected investment size. Sort of very early phase for an investment of tens or several hundreds of thousands of dollars at the most, we'd be evaluating the feasibility of a market, understanding the concept that we're willing to invest in, and deciding will we put R&D onto something to enable a future market or a future product. And at that point, we're basically saying we would like to select this group of people and go out and try to prepare the organization to launch a new product. And that's that earliest phase. The thing that we do to equip the sales force is we generate something we call a new product introduction. And it's basically a very mature straw man. And mature in the perspective that it's got a very high quality of delivery. It looks like a product glossy, something that you would expect customers to be happy to open and read, as opposed to kind of a tatty 2-page PowerPoint. And that document is the thing we allow as a first step to enable our sales force to make progress in the industry.
Okay, very good. And then a couple follow-up questions to that. Who is responsible for launch? And then do you have a launch budget?
So the consistent responsibility for anything that's grossly cross-functional in our company is the business unit. The product line itself in the company is responsible for launch because it's the only organization that aggregates all of the different cross-functional aspects of the company. You can take product design, product engineering, you can take marketing, sales, applications, any of the disciplines in the company. They won't have that same cross-functional view as a person in the business unit who's tied to customers. And so that cross-functional view is required to be successful at launch.
Okay. And in a company like yours at roughly $1.5 billion, how many business units do you have?
Currently operating 13 businesses underneath a set of 3 externally divisible divisions.
Okay. And the business units are determined based on the product line, correct?
Yes, based on product line and highly market-oriented.
Yep. And each business unit, I assume, has a general manager?
Yes, each business unit has a general manager, and above the general manager, an executive VP aggregating businesses. Yeah.
So for the audience listening or watching, I asked that set of questions because this is something that you might want to consider. I mean, many of our clients, particularly in the software industry or the technology sector outside of the semiconductor industry, isn't set up by business unit. There isn't a general manager by product line. And as a result of that, this cross-functional cooperation, what we refer to as strategic alignment, can suffer. And one thing I think that's a best practice that the semiconductor industry does really well, particularly Cypress, is this business unit concept. And it really gets everybody to cooperate. And they have to do it out of necessity. I mean, you just heard from Andrew that they bet thousands, in some cases millions of dollars on a concept, and it has to work or the company's in serious trouble. So something to consider there is thinking about business unit structure inside of a corporate structure based on product line. All right, let me move to questions 6 and 7. So how do you account for launch risks, and how do you measure the success or failure of a launch?
Got it. So we run through a multi-phase launch process, and as I said, we escalate the scope of what's allowed as we go through that process by about a factor of 10 as we go through each step. So at the very initial early documentation phase where you're trying to interact with your customer, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars, a few man-weeks of effort of highly capable resources. And then the next step, after you've gotten to the point of some agreement on a preliminary business plan and some preliminary document to share with your customers, is an agreement to go spend maybe several $100,000 actually doing enabling R&D. And then the step beyond that is to go from several $100,000 to potentially several tens of millions of dollars to do the real investment in the product. And so we control the launch risk by rapidly sequential phase gating. And as we go through each of those escalated R&D phases, we're deciding explicitly should we move forward to the next phase or not at each point, rather than allowing it to run forward ungated.
Very interesting. So rapidly sequential phase gating. Obviously, the key words is rapidly because there's a lot of money at stake. Okay, very helpful. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Andrew and I are going to discuss launch execution now that we've discussed launch planning. So stick around after the break.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI. And my guest today is Andrew Wright, who is the VP of Design at Cypress Semiconductor. Today, we are discussing how to successfully launch a new product. We're using SBI's revenue growth methodology to do it, specifically pages 98 to 106. Get a copy at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. Before the break, Andrew shared with us how he plans the launch. During this segment, we're going to discuss how to execute the launch. So let me dive back into the questions. Andrew, question one for you in segment two here. What are the time objectives for a launch? And I wanted to ask you this because you laid out for us this design in, design win concept. And in your industry, the time frame here, the timeline is very long. It must be a challenge because we're in this world of ever-shrinking cycles. So what is the time objectives and how do you manage that?
Got it. So the range is very large. As I expressed, the timeline from us perceiving a concept with a customer or talking about a concept with a customer all the way through actually an adoption of a phone at an end customer's hand or an adoption of an end product like a set-top box might be something like 2 years. But the fraction of that timeline we get to allocate to determining launch and actually executing the R&D might only be 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
At the beginning of that process.
Okay.
Because our customer has to go through all of their R&D. The time objective range is very large. If you hit the home run, you've got the perfect customer. They're a deep partner. It's somebody you're really engaged with strategically, and they need the product, and they're willing to invest with you. The timeline for the launch could be tomorrow. And that means, spinning on a dime, turning the whole company, and getting everybody from the engineers on the ground to the CEO aligned in hours. And that's the, one extreme condition. At the other extreme, much more normal case, timeline is associated with something like 3 to 6 weeks is what we're trying to achieve from the time we get an idea until we're trying to queue it up for a launch.
Yep. Earlier in segment one, we talked about getting an organization ready for launch, and you discussed this concept of a well-developed straw man that you put in the hands of the sales team, high-quality documents that they can go speak to their customers about. Outside of the semiconductor industry, there's a term for all of those types of activities. It's called sales enablement. Mm-hmm. Do you have the equivalent of that in your business? And if so, where does it live and who owns it?
So again, the ownership, the strategic ownership of enabling long-term direction lies with the business unit. Mm-hmm. That general manager concept is the function, and the people working directly for that general manager is the function that drives direction for launch. And they own usually the creation of that collateral, maybe one or two strategic marketing people in that business or in the corporate headquarters. and they are driving collateral development to enable sales.
Okay. So I want this audience to consider embracing the concept of the business unit with the general manager at the product line. Those that don't embrace that don't do so because it's expensive. So for example, in your case, you've got 13 business units. So if we had to have sales enablement, or let's say product marketing, which sometimes performs the function of sales enablement in each business unit, now we got to have 13 of them, which can be really expensive. So when you think about product marketing or sales enablement, anything that's related to commercializing this innovation that you're getting ready to bring to the market, is it truly one per business unit, or is it set up in kind of a shared structure and you allocate it out across the business units?
Yes, we have a mixture of both, as with any of the large investment organizations, apps, sales, marketing, R&D. We see a benefit to having a portion of that organization being directly tied to businesses or directly tied to specific markets, and a portion of that organization being shared across multiple groups. For example, if I'm going to develop a new XYZ, let's say a NOR product or an SRAM, I want to have a person who's a technical expert in that product work on the development of the collateral. But I don't need to have that person be an expert in editing or producing the right quality of review. I don't need the editor for that collateral to live in that business. Does that help with the example?
Yeah, it does. That's actually a great example, and it shows the degree of sophistication and the degree of collaboration that happens inside of your company here, all the way down to the task level in that example as to who's supposed to do what, which is great. Let's move on to the incentive plan. So sometimes organizations need to change the sales incentive plan to reflect the launch, to try to motivate the sales team to sell the new product that they just invested so heavily in. Does that have to happen at your company? And again, is that different by business unit, or is that kind of one shared thing?
I think it varies extensively by market. We have no mechanism in our corporation right now to incentivize a specific product. We incentivize the design in and the sale of products in general. And so products that have the opportunity, to be very successful in the market, drive incentive through the normal sales incentive process. Mm-hmm. It's something we've considered in the past. We've done it for products that were unusual, where we brought something out to market that was very different and it was hard for our sales force to sell, or it was unusual in terms of customer adoption. But it's not something we have currently. We are currently evaluating should we change that.
Yeah, okay. You know, for the audience, here's my experience on this. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Be careful not to over-rotate and think that the comp plan, can truly change behavior. You could have an incentive in the comp plan, but if the product isn't compelling, if there isn't demand for it, it still might not work. But sometimes it does work. I mean, what you're competing for with the sales force is mind share. And if you have a sales force that has, a very extensive product line, they're carrying a lot of things they can talk to their customers about, sometimes a spiff or some change to the incentive plan can really work. Okay, let's talk about reference customers and testimonials, particularly how do you develop them quickly for something that's new? Does this apply to the semiconductor industry, or is everything you do custom based on that one particular customer?
Absolutely, it applies to the semiconductor industry. If you look at the development of the modern cell phone, or even the development of a set-top box, the vast majority of the architectures are tied to reference designs built by probably 2 or 3 semiconductor manufacturers. And there's peripherals that are different. There's functionality at the surface level that's different. The software is completely different. But what's inside the box is really tied to a small number of silicon providers and the reference designs that they work on. So it really does matter in our industry.
Reference design, that's great. In fact, it actually probably matters more in your industry than elsewhere. Okay, last question in this segment is, how do you measure success during and after launch versus the original assumptions?
Got it. That one's easy for us, maybe more difficult for other people. From the time we do the very first feasibility document all the way through the end of life of the product, we're tracking the revenue assumptions and business planning by revision in the same database structure. So we have every phase of the life of the product, from the earliest concept, that 2-page sales enablement document that goes to the field with the business plan we put together at the time we created that, all the way through end of life of the product in the same database.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, talk about tracking product lifecycle and matching that up to sales resources. That's the best practice. All right, let me recap what we discussed here in this segment, okay? We discussed about time objectives for a launch. We discussed about sales enablement and how critical that is. We discussed product marketing, and how that may or may not be similar to sales enablement. It might be owned by somebody else. And this balance between a centralized marketing team and a distributed marketing team within a business unit structure. We discussed some pros and cons regarding changing the compensation plan based on launch. We talked about developing reference customers and testimonials quickly and how critical that can be as it relates to product launch. And lastly, we talked about measuring the success and/or failure during launch against the original assumptions. So that was a really rich kind of checklist in a short time period around successfully launching a product. So listen up, sales leaders. If you don't know the answers to these questions, and I just went through them really quick, get with your product leader and figure this out ASAP. If your product leader does not launch products correctly, you're on the hook for the revenue tied to this new product, so you're going to miss your number. So you've got to get this right. All right, we're going to take another short break. When we come back, Andrew and I are going to summarize this into an action plan that you can implement immediately. So stick around after the break.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI Podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI Podcast. SBI Podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and my guest today is Andrew Wright. Today we are discussing how to successfully launch a new product. In segment 1 of this show, we discussed how to plan a launch. And in segment 2, we spoke about how to execute a launch. This is our last segment of this show, so let's offer the audience some advice on how to use what they learned today. So Andrew, I'm going to put you on the spot with an unfair question, but do your best to try to summarize what we discussed today into 3 actions an audience member can take immediately to launch a new product.
Okay, 3 things. That's actually quite tough, Greg. I'll give you 2 and a follow-up that I think spans both. The first one is know your customers. If you are not closely tied to the customer base and you're launching a product on a whim based on an internal view of the world, you're very unlikely to be successful. It's a good way to do R&D, but it's a terrible way to make money. The second one, slightly different. Know your capability. If you're going to go after a market and you believe you need to turn on a dime or you need to deliver fast to do something new for a customer, you can't promise more than you're going to deliver. The best way to disappoint a customer long term, especially in an important market, is where you get them very pregnant on an important idea and you're unable to deliver what they need to come through in the market because you will damage their revenue stream. So know your capability. And the last one is execute with vigor. Launch is different from all of the other things that R&D does. All of the other NPI processes are very measured in most companies, very well executed, and launch is the change of direction. The only thing you can do when you're trying to change direction is work hard to align people quickly because it's not something that they are very good at. They're used to marching in a direction, and you're trying to change the direction they're marching in.
Very, very good. You know, I love the first one, know your customers. If you don't know your customers and you do things with an internal view, it's a good way to do R&D, but not a good way to make money. I mean, it's really well said. Excellent takeaway value. All right, let me offer the audience my 2 cents. My guess is you have aggressive growth targets, and a good portion of that growth is tied to the release of a new product or 2. If the launch of these new products gets botched, you're going to miss your number. On the flip side, if the launch is fantastic, it can put wind in your sails, so to speak, and maybe this year is the best year of your entire career. This is why you care. So go partner with your product leader. Find the Andrew equivalent in your organization and review the launch plan step by step. Don't leave it to chance. It's that important. If you want to make sure you get this right, consider having one of our experts help you. for it's not as easy as you might think, especially if you're doing this for the first time. How do you make that happen? Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-workshop. Fill out the form, and we'll send someone to you to walk you through this. Andrew, thanks for letting me interview you today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I also want to thank you, our audience, for tuning in. Producing this show is not easy, but it's really enjoyable for me personally because you're responding so well to it. Thank you for the killer download numbers and all the comments of encouragement that you send me via email. Until next time, I wish you good luck as you try to make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.